Yeah, my name is Abby Huseth, and I am the Outreach Director with Climate Smart Missoula. Our Climate Smart team is on the call today. Amy Sillenberger is our Executive Director, and Kelly Littleton is our Program Director. I'll pass it, you'll probably hear from both of them as well this evening. Let's see, quick overview. We'll be meeting this evening from 5:15 to 6:15, and hoping just to share a little bit with you all. Hopefully you're here to get excited about learning more about electrification and solar and getting resources for going solar and becoming a solar advocate. That's really what it's all about. Before we go too much further, I want to just take a moment to pause and recognize that for those of us here in Missoula anyway, we're gathering on the traditional homelands of the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille peoples. We want to acknowledge the past and continuing harms of colonization in our valley that have contributed to trauma and structural inequities that we're still wrestling with today. And we also acknowledge the deep wisdom and knowledge that our Indigenous communities have developed over hundreds of generations of living on this land, and how they're on the front lines of some of the most critical work to address the climate crisis. So let's see. A little overview for this evening. We'll start with some questions that we've prepared to get the conversation with our wonderful panelists started this evening. And then we'll take a little break about maybe a little after midway through, give you all a chance to virtually connect through a very quick breakout session and kind of compare notes on some of your questions. And then I'll bring you all back, and you can share any questions that you came up with in your small breakout groups with in the chat function, and we'll continue getting those questions answered. So we should have plenty of time for that. Don't worry, I will walk you through all those ins and outs. It's easy, and hopefully it will be fun. We're still here on Zoom, but you'll just have to imagine it would be like if we were networking and all together in person. Hopefully we can happen again soon. Let's see. All right, I want to just get us started today with just a couple of words of context about why we're talking about Electrify Missoula and electrification, and why we have to electrify everything and how solar is part of that. So Kelly, would you just say a couple words about that to let folks know kind of the impetus for why we're here?
Sure, yeah. So Electrify Missoula stems from this concept of electrifying everything. And I'm sure some of you have heard this term before. It's been quite trendy over the last year or so in the energy world. But it essentially means replacing technologies that typically run on combustion, like gas vehicles and gas boilers in your home, with alternatives that run on electricity. So the goal of electrifying being to get as much of our energy consumption as possible hooked up to an increasingly cleaner grid. So a grid that's in large part powered by renewables like solar. Yeah, and I guess I'll speak to our relatively new Electrify Missoula program, Abby, if that's all right with you. I can't pass by a good plug opportunity, but so we have a relatively new Electrify Missoula campaign, which is a partnership between Climate Smart Missoula, the county or Missoula County and the city of Missoula, which is focused on electrifying the building sector. So really targeting the main source of energy consumption and GHG emissions in homes, which is space and water heating. So we're focusing on how we can help people make the switch from gas boilers, gas furnaces, gas stoves to high efficiency electric systems like heat pumps and electric stoves. The dream being to electrify everything, so switch to these healthier, more efficient electric systems, and then power everything with renewable energy, so solar, to get us to this net zero energy future. That's my spiel, Abby. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, we're going to kind of bring our panelists into the virtual panel space here, but that's a great way to kick off kind of the questions getting started. I mean, it's just interesting too, as we're thinking about putting together this event, kind of how interconnected the challenges out there in the wider world are with what we're working on right here in Missoula. And it's pretty cool to see that there's so much interest, and you all are here tonight to learn more about solar, but also this broader idea of transitioning off of fossil fuels and you know, with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine on top of all of our minds and kind of all of these big connections. I think it's really timely, and it's exciting to feel like there are real solutions that we can be part of here right in our own backyard. So thanks, Kelly, for kicking us off. And as Kelly mentioned, and a lot of you probably already know, but Missoula does have a goal to reach 100% clean electricity by 2030. It's a bold goal, and we know that solar is a great way to get there. I wanted to kick it off to our panelists, whoever wants to jump in first. With this community goal of reaching 100% clean electricity by 2030, what role really could solar play? Let's start big here, and then we'll get down into the nuts and bolts next. But can you give us a sense of solar potential here in Missoula, in Montana?
Yeah, I guess I can jump in and start.
Go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, so first of all, obviously, thanks for having me. I'm Andrew with the Montana Renewable Energy Association. Yeah,
I totally failed to introduce the panelists. Can I like rewind?
We can use self-intro, because we all know each other so well. We're just used to hanging out and talking together.
This is true. Yeah, go ahead. I'll jump in next. Go ahead though.
Okay, great. Yeah, you know, I think solar plays a really big role. I mean, any kind of movement you want to make towards 100% clean energy, I think you need to look at solar as part of that solution. It's zero emissions, obviously, there's no moving parts. It's got a lot of benefits about it, from just the kind of reliability and long-standing nature of it. I think when you're talking about making a transition, especially for, you know, a community or a state or a nation, you know, you need to look at large-scale renewables, right? I mean, that's how you're going to make the biggest change and affect the biggest number of people. But there are so many studies out there talking about the role of distributed generation, like rooftop solar and storage, about microgrids, about just kind of how this smaller scale, about efficiency, right? And how do we take action at the small scale that helps make action at the large scale easier? Because decarbonizing the entire grid is really hard. It's a big old train set that's 100 years old, that was designed for a very specific purpose. So the more we can make that job easier, I think the better. And I think that is definitely a role for smaller scale renewables and storage and efficiency.
Yeah. Paul, are you raising your hand? Go for it. Paul Herendeen is with the Clearwater Credit Union. He's kind of our financial guru. He's done a lot of research and work on the financing side of solar and helping make that easier. Go for it, Paul.
Thanks. And yeah, I'll speak outside of my depth here. Just to make a couple of quick points about the role of solar in this transition, I'll make two. The first of those is, you might not expect it, but the solar resource in Montana is in fact quite good. It's one of the better ones in the nation. It's similar to large parts of the Midwest and the Southeast, even though it's quite gray here in the winter and we're fairly far north. In the summertime, it's not so cloudy, and we produce a lot of energy. So this is actually a great state to do solar in. That's my first point. The second point is I'll just highlight something that happened in this back and forth, is talking about 100% clean electricity and then 100% clean energy. And from a climate perspective, it's really 100% clean energy is the goal. And that means replacing systems that run on combustion with systems that run on electricity. We've thought about this in some of our facilities projects, and I think it's something that homeowners can think a lot about as well. A friend of mine and most of the panelists is an architect, and I'm into efficiency. And I remember talking to him about his house, and he said, listen, this house is 100 years old. I could do a gut remodel, deep energy retrofit for $100,000. or I could slap solar panels on the roof and put in a heat pump and not sweat the insulation so much, honestly. So to be part of that 100% clean energy transition, electrifying things like the heating system in your home and then powering that with a rooftop solar panel really is a terrific step along that path. That's all I got.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know not everyone has the ability or capacity to access rooftop solar on their own home or business. But there's also work that's being done right now in our community, especially what's a really cool opportunity is there's lots of public buildings and opportunities for our community to really invest in rooftop solar, and that's something that everyone ultimately benefits from. Orion, did you want to say anything about, I think the recent project on Missoula County Detention Centers has, maybe gone under the radar for some folks, and I just think it's a really cool example of our community investing in solar.
Yeah, I could definitely speak to that project. I'm Orion Thornton with OnSite Energy, co-owner of we're a solar electric engineering procurement construction firm, primarily based out of Bozeman, but I live over here in Missoula. I've been over here for about 3 years now. And yeah, the one thing I want to kind of add about just solar in general for communities across Montana is the versatility and scalability. So we could talk about, projects all the way down to being like a small off-grid cabin powered by solar and batteries to someone's home, someone's business, an industrial facility, and all the way up to utility scale solar. So it can fill so many gaps in that regard, in actual applications for facilities. So that has a lot of value there, I think, in comparison to other technologies. And it's one of the reasons why it's kind of taken the lead, as one of the best forms of renewable energy has versatility, easy to deploy, reliable. So it doesn't take much research to see, why it's kind of photovoltaics in particular have become kind of a driving force in the clean energy sector. Yeah, the project, I won't spend too much time on it, but the Missoula County Detention Facility is a project that we worked on last summer. That is the largest rooftop system in the state at this point, and it was really driven by the county. Diana Mineta, the commissioners, some other members, Climate Smart was involved early on in kind of assessing viability of doing it in a kind of creative financial structure, third-party financing. And so it's just a really cool project to see how many people came together within the community to do something that's never been done in the state so far, which was a large non-export system on an industrial facility with third-party financing. And that's already spawned some additional projects. This summer, we'll be working on the project for the Missoula Wastewater Treatment Facility, which would be a little bigger than the detention facility at about 550 kilowatts, and it'll be third-party financed also. So just fun to see kind of what's happened in the Missoula community to spawn some bigger action in the industry. So hopefully that kind of continues, because we've had some limitations here in the state in regards to just utility requirements and interconnection requirements that have held us back. So good to see things moving forward.
Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, thank you all for kind of helping give us the big picture on solar and Missoula and beyond, and how it's part of the key to electrifying everything, and all the different scales that we're looking at and talking about. I thought we could dive in and kind of go down next to the much smaller scale, the nuts and bolts. I'll mention to folks who might have just joined a little bit late, hang on to your questions. There will be time to answer them, and we'll have a chance to check in with some of the other participants and get those questions coming forward in a little bit. So thanks for being here. Next question for you all. So I'm interested in going solar on my home or business. I'm not sure whether it's doable, but it's something I'm interested in. Where would I start? What are the basic steps? It's always helpful to kind of have an overview of that in our mind before moving forward.
I guess I can jump in again, but then obviously we've got a solar professional with us that probably knows a little bit about the process. So, you know, we get this question a lot at MREA, and we actually have a handout on our website that walks you through this exact process, because we got the question so often. We figured it'd be good to put it together on a piece of paper. But what we tell people is to really start with a little bit of a mental exercise of thinking about what your goals are with solar. So, you know, how much of your energy production or energy use at your home do you want to offset with solar? Is it 100%? Is it 50%? How are your energy needs going to change over the coming years? You know, if your parents is your kid moving out and going to college, that's probably going to reduce your energy bill. Are you intending to install a hot tub? You know, that's probably going to increase your energy bill. Things like that. So, you know, or an electric vehicle, right? So things might change. Getting a few copies of your recent energy bills. If you can get up to a year worth, that's great. Just having those handy. And then start thinking about your budget and kind of how much you're willing to spend and what you're interested in spending. And then the next step really is taking all that information and reaching out to a solar contractor. And the reason I mentioned thinking through all those things that I just listed is because that's what your solar professional is going to ask about. They're going to be interested in getting that information and that data and then asking you those questions and kind of going from there. So Ryan, maybe I'll pass it to you here talking about site assessments and stuff like that. But, you know, that's the place to start, is kind of the mental exercise. And then, you know, just like any other thing that you want to install or product at your home, you know, you reach out to contractors and you get some bids and you work with them and kind of move the project forward. So, Orion, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, that was great, Andrew. I think that's exactly how people kind of need to start the process, is just really thinking about those goals and you know, what they kind of want to accomplish, because that really helps when you're then going and contacting contractors. You know, you already kind of have a vision of your project yourself and what you're looking for, and that's going to help them to get to a proposal point for you a little quicker. Yeah, I mean, assuming all of you are in the Missoula area, like, you know, you have a lot of great options for solar contractors here. So you're going to get, you know, probably like some different input from each one if you contact them and have them come do a site assessment. You know, maybe different equipment and stuff like that, but it's all going to be really pretty similar. You should be able to compare things pretty easily among them. And, you know, ultimately, it's going to come down to, you know, just like what you feel fits your needs, who's providing that to you. And yeah, you just got to lean on those contractors, you know, because, and that's kind of, I think for the solar industry, it's interesting because it's just different, a little different than other trades. You really, like, as a solar contractor, there's a lot of information that you need to process and then, you know, kind of get back to the homeowner in maybe like a lot of different options, and just a lot of education that you have to provide too, because it is ultimately, it's a technology that most people aren't going to know a lot about the nuts and bolts of it. So kind of getting that information in front of people is important, how it's going to work, you know, how you're going to monitor the system, things like that. But in general, my advice is just to really lean on the solar contractors and, you know, for their knowledge, because, you know, that's a great resource in itself. And there's great people here in Missoula who have been doing it for many, many years. So yeah, I think that once you get going down that process with a couple of contractors, you'll get up the curve, get educated, find out exactly how many panels you can fit on your house, where the equipment's going to go, how much energy it's going to offset for you. And it's really kind of should be a fun process in a lot of ways, you know, because you're learning a lot about your energy usage and you're learning about solar power at the same time. So I would just go into it like thinking like, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, I'm going to learn a lot here. And hopefully I'm going to come out of it like with the ability to make an investment in solar. And they should give you options, talk about like Clearwater Credit Union's program and DEQ loan program. Like, that should all be provided to you in your proposal, right? So like everything's coming in front of you should give you the opportunity to make a good decision on whether or not to move forward with a solar project for your home or business.
Yeah, if I can just add one thing on top of that, which Orion mentioned that I really just want to make sure to reiterate is Montana's, just because of the nature of our industry here in the solar market here, most installers in the state, most solar and wind professionals here have been doing this for a long time. I think we have very few relatively young businesses, to be honest. There's a lot of experience here. And the market is growing, you know, those businesses are adding employees, which is a good thing, but there's a ton of expertise here, which is great. You know, in some of these larger markets like California or Massachusetts or Arizona or Colorado, you see a lot of kind of almost pop-up shops with solar. And we really don't have that here in Missoula or in Montana. So I think we're really fortunate in that regard.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I'll just add to that real quick. I think we've never seen like a big boom, a big solar boom like other places. And so like anyone that's in the industry has probably just been doing it for a living for a long time. There was never like, we've never had an influx of companies coming in because there was some like big incentive or something, right? We've had to kind of build the industry just on our own footing without like major incentives available. Whereas there's other places where there was like all of a sudden the big state incentive or something. I always give the Front Range of Colorado as an example because at one point there was this incentive that came in place, and all of a sudden there's like 200 solar contractors that popped up, and 2 years later it was back down to like 20. You know, so Andrew's exactly right. Like anyone you contact, anyone that you're going to find with a Google search or a phone book or anything is going to be probably pretty solid company. You know, which is really great. I think that's a really good thing about our industry. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, thank you all for those insights. And you kind of hinted at the next question, which is, you know, a lot of people don't have the money to purchase panels or solar array outright. What are the options there? Can you walk us through some of those financing options? Are there new or creative options or incentives out there, or that we know may be coming? Kick that one off, Paul. You're nodding.
Yeah, thanks. And I see we got some hands up, and there's a question in the chat. And I think we're going to round up some of those at the end. So we will get to you. Happy to talk about that. I'll follow up very briefly, if I could, on the last one. Just having run a couple of facility scale solar projects. You know, how do you get started? I think Andrew and Orion both had terrific advice. So I won't repeat that. I will say it does depend on how you research things. Talking to the professionals is great. If you're somebody like me who likes to get on the internet and nerd out, there's a lot of things you can do there. There's a system called PV watts, which you can draw a little thing on your roof and estimate how much energy you're going to get. If you're interested in the financial side, we did put together a little white paper about how to think about solar as an investment. It's not a short answer to that, so I'd refer you to that. And to the question that popped up in the chat, does solar add value to your home? We address that in there. Short answer is it's very difficult to tell, and I wouldn't count on it. As far as other process things, I would think about, even though it makes more work for good folks like Orion, I'd always recommend getting a couple of bids. You can get caught up in the weeds of that, where it's, you know, this many panels and this many watts. So the way to put those on an equal footing is to just look at them in terms of dollar per watt. And that lets you compare pretty well between them. We also put together a little one-page sheet, bid comparison worksheet to help organize that stuff. And the last thing I'll say about that is, when you're getting bids, I would encourage you not to compare them just on price. You're looking for people you can really work with and are going to be responsive. Things can go wrong in these, issues can crop up, inverters go into fault. And you want to get a company that, a good company that you feel like you're going to be able to work with. And almost all of them in Montana are. We have a tremendous base of installers here. So on to the financing question. If you don't want to pay up front, you really have two options in the state. The first of those is the DEQ, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, has something called the Alternative Energy Revolving Loan Program. And it's basically a loan fund, and they have very low interest rates. I think 3.25%. I think they go up to $40,000, 10 or 15-year term. And that's a really cheap loan. It's a great program. They're good friends of ours. They're strong supporters of the solar industry, and that's a good option. Because it's such a good program, the benefit to consumers is when Clearwater Credit Union wanted to get involved, we really had to go all out to make something competitive. So we put together a loan program ourselves, and we really had to sharpen the pencils to try and beat the DEQ. And we think we did, honestly. So we have a loan as well. Currently, it can go up to $75,000, even higher with special approval. It's 3.9%, which is a higher rate, but there's absolutely no fees on ours. There's a couple of different fees that are on the DEQ program that boost the equivalent interest rate, the APR. So we're basically at parity there, depending on the size of the system. It's about the same cost. Ours is an unsecured loan, meaning we can't come and take the solar panels off your roof if you don't pay. More to the point, it makes ours really quick and easy to administer. We can approve them like that. And in fact, that's one of the main ways we try to compete with the DEQ, is we have a very fast process for getting those moved. The other benefit to ours is you can wrap in associated roof work. If you need to take your system off to redo your roof, that does add a couple $1,000s to the roof project. So if you decide you want to go ahead and tackle both at once, you can roll that into our loan. So we do have brochures about that. I'd encourage you to look at that. Always happy to send people to the DEQ as well. As far as incentives, and Andrew and Orion, do jump in if I get these wrong. Really, the major one right now is the federal tax credit. There was a state tax credit for a while that got rescinded, so that no longer exists. The federal tax credit currently is 26% of the price of the system, and is going to step down to 23% next year, I believe. Major incentive, you definitely want to get that. My understanding is, well, first of all, it's a non-refundable tax credit, not to go too far into it, but you have to have a sufficient tax liability to take advantage of it. So if you put in a $15,000 system, you need a roughly $5,000 tax liability that you can counterbalance with that. My understanding is you can actually take that over several years to recapture that. But that's basically what we got going on as far as incentives. Did I miss anything?
That's a great overview of where we currently stand. Go for it, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah, just two notes on the
Yeah.
federal tax incentive, and I'm trying to pull up Emory's website now because I'm trying to remember. The Energy Policy Act of 2020 extended it, so I thought it went down to 20. Oh no, Paul, you're right. I stand corrected. I'm sorry. It is 22% next year. God, time flies. The only other thing I was going to mention, Paul, just to make your life harder, is DEQ just released their APR for this year, and it's now down to 3%. So you guys may have to recalculate everything once again.
Yeah, we're happy to do it. It's great for the industry, but they push us.
Absolutely. For anybody living in the greater Missoula area, that might be maybe in the county, there are some other options, like through USDA, their Rural Energy for America program. You can get a grant if you work for an agricultural business or a small rural business. It's an actual grant, not just a loan. So you can look into that option. And then if you're a like nonprofit organization, if you're a school or a library or something like that, or you're connected to a school or library, Northwestern Energy has their Universal Systems Benefits program, which is another grant program that you can find information about. I know it's on our website. I'm sure it's on other websites as well, but there are a couple other options out there. If you're just a homeowner, like Paul said, the loans and the tax credit are really your options.
Yeah, the last incentive I was going to add, and we don't often talk about it as an incentive, but it is, which is net metering. Without it, it makes grid tie solar pretty tough. So, and we haven't talked, no one's kind of explained exactly what net metering is, and many of you might already know, but it's basically just the ability for you to put solar on your home and produce more than you're consuming, and basically spin your meter backwards and build credits, and then use those credits at a later time with the utility company. So it really is an incentive, and kind of the bare bones incentive that we need to keep the industry moving forward. So next time there's a legislative battle, which will happen next year, next winter. Be there to support net metering, please, because that is an important incentive for us.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Net metering is a really key policy that we've got on the books now, and we're lucky to have actually a pretty decent net metering policy for Montana. We get 1-to-1 credits, and that kind of dovetails great into it's like you guys have done this before. Into my next question for you, and we will take a pause here and get questions from the audience and for participants shortly here. But what do we know about changes in solar policy at the state or federal level, and that may be coming, and what might they mean for us here in Missoula?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So what we know coming down the pipeline, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, right now, as far as legislation on the table at the state level in Montana, we don't know. You know, the legislative session will kick up again in January. Right now, the interim committees of the legislature aren't studying any issue that, in my mind, impacts small, rooftop solar. They have in the past, but this particular interim, none of their studies are really focused on that. So we don't have a sense right now of anything in particular that we're expecting. MREA typically always expects an attack on rooftop solar each legislative session. That's been the MO for at least the last 10 or 12 years. So, it's a pretty safe bet. And there's always the chance that something will pop up at the Public Service Commission as well. So on the regulatory side of things, Northwestern Energy will be filing a rate review this year. So they will be filing to update their cost for electricity for all of us, and natural gas. Actually, they're doing what's called joint filing, so they'll address electricity and natural gas. It remains to be seen whether or not they will make a proposal to go after rooftop solar. We simply don't know for certain yet, but we'll be following that. In the next couple of months, that will be a big priority item if they do. They did that a couple of years ago, for those who recall, and we fought tooth and nail to protect net metering and won, actually, which was huge. So we were excited about that. But of course, we got that big victory in 2019. And then, of course, the very next legislative session, they turned around and went right back after net metering. So that's kind of what we expect these days. At the federal level, there's a ton of money from the bipartisan infrastructure package that is just going to be flowing into states in the next couple of months. And I think it's going to be a little bit of drinking from the fire hose, and kind of in a good way. And it remains, there are a lot of programs that have kind of names and titles and themes, like, $550 million for solar on schools, and hundreds of $1 million for electric vehicle infrastructure. But we're not at the point yet where we have details on those programs, so we don't know specifically what is going to qualify or not qualify, and how to go after that. What I do know is really anybody involved in energy right now in the state is following all of that very closely, including not just advocates, but local city, county staff are wondering, what's going to happen with that funding. And just to get everyone a little bit of a more full picture, with the infrastructure package, there's essentially two large streams of money that are going to flow to states. So the first is what's called formulaic funding. And all that means is there's a big pot of money, and the federal government uses a formula to figure out how much each state gets based on population and other things like that. And each state is guaranteed X number of dollars. and that's just given to the state to use for purposes, you know, X, Y, and Z. Then there's a second pot of money that's competitive funding that states can apply for, you know, either state agencies or, you know, county governments or whatever it is. So there's a lot of opportunities out there that are going to start opening in the next, like, probably 6 to 12 months. And I'm excited to say I've heard legislators on both sides of the aisle, which is refreshing, say, you know, if there's money floating out there, we should probably go get it, which is really exciting. So we're hoping that that's the case, and we'll see. So there's a lot up in the air, but you know, ask me again closer to November, and I'll be able to share a little more, at least from my perspective.
For Ryan, did you want to add anything to that before I jump in?
Nope. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I'll just give a plug for the MREA here. There is nobody keeping a closer eye on this stuff than the MREA, and they've been tremendous advocates. I'll just talk about this briefly from the financial side as the banker. Orion mentioned net metering. That's really a key element of the financial performance of your solar system. Without going into too much detail, the idea basically is like, okay, it's noon on the 4th of July. Your solar panels are probably producing more energy than you're using. There's just mismatches throughout the day. Currently, when that meter spins backward, you get credited at the same price that you get charged for electricity. That's good. And that is not the case everywhere. And in fact, changing that is one of the major risks to the financial performance of a system. If you look at the financial performance of rooftop solar, residential scale, it's roughly speaking about a 7% rate of return on that right now. That's really good for what it is, because solar panels are warranted for 25 years. We know what the sun is going to be doing. There might be the small changes in weather, but like, it's very predictable, basically a guaranteed performance out of that. So that's a very safe investment with a 7% rate of return versus a T-bill or something like that, which I don't know what the 10 years doing right now, 2% or something. So it's very attractive as a risk-adjusted rate of return. The major risk to that is if there is a change to that rate that you are credited for overproduction. That's probably the number one financial risk. So I'll just point that out. That's a legislative thing. You'd expect that even if there were a change, they would probably grandfather in existing customers. Who knows?
Awesome. You all are so knowledgeable about all these things. So we could continue, we could keep talking about all the details for days. And we love to get into the weeds. So I'm wanting to make sure we do have some time for audience questions. I know folks have been popping things in the chat, and we have a quick thing for that. I think Amy wanted to mention something as well before we go into very brief breakout rooms and say hello and formulate some more questions for panelists. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, hi folks. I'm with Climate Smart Missoula also, and I'm really glad you guys are all here. I hope you can stick around for the next bunch of minutes while we answer some of these questions. But just wanted to mention too, we do know what's on the playing field right now. Andrew mentioned that with the infrastructure bill, we know a bunch of money is coming, and we really are trying in Missoula and elsewhere to pay attention to that so that it doesn't just fly from Washington, D.C. over to the coast, which can sometimes happen. And I also mentioned that the real money that might help like nonprofits and churches and folks that don't have tax liability or are low income residents is really all in the Build Back Better bill, which is almost but not completely dead. It is not dead. It can't be dead until it's until it's really dead. But point being, we still have some opportunity to try to get that federal reconciliation bill passed. Feel free to call up our senators and mention stuff. I think we might do a few more calls to action at the end, but I just can't pass by an opportunity to say that that's really where some of the true financial benefits and equity for solar, it lands in there. And then similarly, we aren't waiting only for that here in Missoula. Here at Climate Smart, we have a carbon offset footprint fund that we're kind of ramping back up. And we've just been talking to some of our low income housing developers in town about what if we as a community, pooled our money with a carbon offset program, which I won't go into. It's a little bit, I don't want to divert us, but and helped get solar on some of our low-income housing developments. There's an opportunity for our community to help support that. So if you're thinking that all of this is just for your own home, there are more opportunities that are hopefully here in the short term and also maybe in the long term. And I just wanted to make sure folks recognize that. More details to follow and all. So please before you leave, especially throw your email in the chat and we'll make sure that we can catch up with you with all these links and with more. So yeah, I think there's more opportunity to push the envelope on solar beyond just homes, I hope. Thanks, that was it, Abby.
Yeah, that's a great point and a good spot for us to take a pause. We're seeing lots of good questions already, but let's take this looks going to feel short, but we're going to take like 4 minutes and break folks into very small breakout groups of 3. We know sometimes it's nice to just meet a couple of some fellow participants, but also run your questions by, and you may be surprised to have similar questions. This will just help us narrow things down for our panelists, knowing that we only have a few minutes left in this kind of brief introduction tonight. But Amy, are the breakout groups ready to go?
I need just 1 minute.
Take your time. Okay, sounds good.
Sorry about
Take
that.
a moment while we're waiting. And if you want to drop your email in the chat, that'd be great. If you would rather just send me a direct message, you can message it to me directly through the chat function as well. And we will make sure that everyone here tonight gets some follow-up email with information and links and resources in this recording.
Abby, what time do you think we'll be wrapping up tonight?
We had 6:15 on the docket. I think our panelists are willing to hang out for another couple minutes after that, if there are any really pressing questions or specifics. But I will also share their contact information in the chat to follow up if you don't get a chance to have your question answered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Abby, just while we're waiting for Amy to finish up there, I'll just plug. I'm always grateful to be with other fellow experts on these topics. In particular, part of MRE's mission is to be an educational resource. It's right in our statement. So, I really love calls and emails from the public to nerd out about this stuff. So, especially, anybody in Missoula where I also reside, I really hope you all take us up on the offer. So please reach out with any kind of questions. We're always happy to talk about it. So.
Great. So I have the breakout rooms. Abby might have a direction or two. Just hang with us, folks. We're still lamenting the fact that this is just like a one-way street. We're missing being together. So these breakout rooms do offer this opportunity to visit together. And then at the end of this, we'd also love to know, do you guys want to meet? Do we want to gather? How do you guys want to move forward in this somewhat different COVID world? But this is an opportunity for just 4 minutes. Abby, do you have more directions? Or are you going to?
No, that's it. Just feel free to share. Make sure everyone in your group has a chance. It's a short time together, but make sure everyone has a chance to share the questions that you're pondering. And maybe if you have similar questions, you can think of how to phrase them for our panelists. Once we come back, I'll ask you to drop those questions that your group came up with in the chat, and we'll sort through and see if we can get as many of them answered. Come back to the main session. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Hopefully that was helpful, or if not, just a fun 2-minute way to meet some folks. And we'll start going through those questions. I was going to look back up. I don't know if we mentioned on this call yet. There were some questions about community solar or shared solar. Does anybody want to just speak to that?
I could jump in quickly, share, and just describe it. Shared solar is essentially a setup in which some kind of third party, be it a utility or private individual or business or whatever, builds a larger solar array. So for example, let's just use 100 kilowatts. Your average residential system in Montana is probably about 7 kilowatts. So let's use 100. And then they build that somewhere, say in a field that they own or something like that. And then individuals can essentially purchase a subscription to the energy coming off of that solar array. So there are a couple different ways you can do it. One of the ways to think about it is you're purchasing like by the panel. So you can purchase 2 panels or 4 solar panels or whatever, and then you're guaranteed the energy production off of that solar array. So it's a way for multiple businesses, families, individuals to all subscribe to this array. And conceptually, the whole idea is that it acts just like as if you had rooftop solar on your own home. So you pay whatever the price is. You get net metering credits. We've been talking about net metering. So you get net metering credits just as if it were on your home. The only difference is it's physically located somewhere else. In Montana right now, the way our statutes are written, shared solar is not allowed in Northwestern Energy's territory. That's the interpretation that we have. The cooperatives are not subject to those same statutes. So our rural electric cooperatives in the state are allowed to do shared solar, and in fact, many of them have. I know Rivali Electric has, Missoula Electric has done 3 now, at least 2, if not 3 different shared solar ones. They have a shared solar array out actually on top of the school out in Frenchtown. That was a cool partnership. They also have one on top of K3, the Kettle House brewing operation out in Bonner. And that's a shared solar array as well. And then there are other co-ops in the state out in the central and eastern part that have done it too. But Northwestern can't, or at least our interpretation is that they can't. But it's a great project. It's a great program because it allows, if you have shade on your roof and it's not good for solar, or if you're a renter and you can't, you're not allowed to put solar on your roof, or if you just want 1 or 2 panels and don't want to put up 10 or 12, the economies of scale are a little different. So it's a cool kind of program. And there have definitely been attempts to try and pass policies that allow community solar and shared solar in the past. And those have run up against some pretty heavy opposition, but never say never, I guess.
Yeah, if I could, I'll just add something to that very briefly. Community solar is great. We'd love to do it. We ended up owning some property up by the interstate that would have been perfect for it. And it's simply not allowed under existing utility policy. You're also not allowed to pick your provider. I mean, you don't have a choice of going with a co-op or Northwestern. That is decided by your geography. So as far as a call to action, the utilities, the regulated utilities, Northwestern, which serves about half the state, is a government granted monopoly in exchange for being governed in the public interest by the Public Service Commission. And the race, they're elected officials, and those races are probably the most influential in the state for solar energy policy. Nobody knows about them. So pay attention to those races, they're important.
Yeah. Great point, Paul. Awesome. There's another question. It was Dave Morris' question. We were talking about shared solar, but this may be a little bit different. And Dave, you can clarify if you need to. Can you talk about the programs that let you buy panels in large commercial solar facilities? Are any of these planned for Montana? Also, I'm interested in the effectiveness of programs that stand between you and the utility and buy renewable energy projects, i.e. Arcadia. That's the common one that folks have heard of. We can get that question too. Anybody want to talk about that?
Yeah, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. There's I think of 2 things that can work well for commercial solar. The first of those is something called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. Which essentially allows you to make improvements, energy efficiency improvements to a commercial property, that's CPACE, and then pay it back through an assessment on your property tax bill. that has a number of advantages, namely it stays with the property. So you can sell the property and it transfers, which lets you have a much longer term on the loan, which then brings the monthly cost down. And then there's also some benefits in the way that's treated on commercial balance sheets. That just got passed at the state level after years of fighting and many attempts. So CPACE is now legal in Montana. Missoula was one of the first jurisdictions to opt in. That all just happened. There hasn't even been a project yet. And we're working on putting that together. The other big way you can get big commercial projects done is by on nonprofits, is by bringing in what they call a tax equity investor. One of the big problems for nonprofits is you don't get that 26% federal tax credit because you don't pay federal income taxes. So you build a fairly complicated legal structure. You bring in somebody to be a partner who can take that. That brings the cost of the project down. Now you can put a ton of solar on something like a university or let's say the prison, the local prison. That was a project put together. I've already said too much because that was a project put together by Orion and his team as the solar installers on that. And they've done a couple of those, and that's really exciting. So I'll stop talking about it and see if Orion wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, you covered it pretty well there, Paul. I think, yeah, I think the third party thing is still in its infancy here in Montana. So I think there's a lot to be developed there in terms of kind of opportunities for local folks to be involved in the financing. Maybe not a single individual, but a group of individuals. We'll probably also see out-of-state entities kind of coming in and looking at that. We're not likely to see it happen on the residential level, I don't think, but I could be wrong. I think it's going to be pretty focused on kind of commercial and industrial facilities. But that does happen around the country with companies like Sunrun and Solar City and stuff like that in the past. So yeah, it's yet to be determined kind of how this third party financing aspect of the industry is going to evolve in Montana.
Yeah, thank you guys. There's a question in the chat about the renewable rate option. Do you want to say something about that, Amy?
Yeah, I'll jump in here.
On that?
Renewable rate option is also this green tariff, and basically what this is we can't meet at the very beginning of the call. We talked about the importance of our 100% clean electricity goals and how we actually reach those with solar. And we can put solar just about everywhere on our roofs, but that's not going to get us to that goal. And so the idea is that we would like some of those bigger projects that we just discussed aren't legal here. So the idea is to work with Northwestern Energy and see if we could come up with an option where they potentially build and own a big solar farm, and actually we are allowed to opt into that. So it's kind of a little bit of a runaround of the things that we talked about that aren't currently legal right now, but it would probably have to get Public Service Commission to buy into it, but it would be an opt-in program. Missoula's interested, Bozeman's interested, Helena's interested, and basically the status of that renewable rate option or green tariff is that we're still in negotiations with Northwestern Energy to see if we can come up with something that works for them and works for community members and local government. And it's long and slow, but we haven't given up yet. So it's really the local governments working with a consultant to see if that could happen. So, a lot of these things aren't, they are kind of slow, but they're really technical. And again, we're hoping that we can come up with some terms that work so that, yes, exactly like we just talked about, more people could benefit. But in the meantime, it's like we just kind of keep building solar where we can, which is on people's roofs and with some small commercial spaces as we can. So if you want more details, it's kind of a side conversation. I think it can get pretty wonky pretty fast, but we're not giving up.
Hey, real quick, can I just jump in really quick? Just a note to everybody that the reason why I asked that question was that there's a meeting going, it's in March. I don't know exactly the date, but the Missoula, Bozeman, Helena collective effort with energy strategies out of Salt Lake City, the consultant, they're meeting with Northwestern this month So I just wanted to toss that out, that has been a long, slow process, but it's potentially coming to a decision point here really
Yeah.
soon. And that, I thought it was topical, and maybe everybody would be
No,
interested.
thank you
Yeah.
for that, Mike. Yeah, it's coming to a point where we're either going to decide that there's something there or that it's not feasible and not worth it. So hard decisions will be made soon.
I just thought folks here might have the most updated version. Sounds like that's where we are now. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. It is timely. There are things happening in our community, and I think that's a great place to kind of segue our conversation for this evening. But I know we're already kind of over time, and I could have guessed this would happen. There's always just so much to talk about. I think some of our panelists may be able to hang out for another couple of minutes. I know there were a couple of questions that didn't get answered yet, but before folks who do need to leave hop off, I wanted to just share a couple of quick calls to action. First, be sure to drop your emails in the chat. We'll send resources, links in today's recording. Not everybody is in a position to do something or take action and put solar on their roof right today, but we can all be having solar conversations. We can all maybe you can be the mover and shaker in the organization or group that you're a part of, or get your family member who doesn't own a home to start thinking about this. So that's something that everybody can be part of. Writing letters to the editor and op-eds about all of this stuff, they matter, and being part of the narrative, that's all important. And if we want to see more incentives for solar from the federal level, who doesn't, we want to see those tax credits extended and all those benefits that could come down the line from the federal climate bill that we hear is not dead in the water yet. Make a couple of phone calls to our senators, and we are really hopeful that can get across the line. So those are just a few calls to action. Thanks, Andrew, for the shout out. We'll take your money and do good work with it. We promise. But mostly just thank you all for being here for sure. And those who need to hop off, please feel free to do so. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Before you go, drop your email if you haven't yet, and we'll be back in touch. And stay tuned. Here's one more piece that I wanted to share: contact info for panelists in case folks need it. And our next webinar in the series is on April 6th at 5:15, same Zoom link. We hope you'll hop back on and join us and learn more about electrification of our homes and buildings and why we have to get off gas and fossil fuels. It's all a timely conversation. So thanks to all everybody else who needs to jump off. Otherwise, we'll stick around for a couple minutes. I know. I don't know
if that went through. Did you click send to the last one?
Oh, I sent it just to Paul. That's not super helpful. Paul.
Great.
Thank you. Back and forth with all these messages. There it is.
Okay. Good, because I'll collect the chat at the end of this and make sure we have.
We'll save all those things.
Yeah. There was a question, Vicki, that an interest about somebody from the city. The city doesn't have that capacity to come out unless it's part of building code, inspections and things. So, luckily we do have folks that it's more the contractors that will look at that, but our local government doesn't have that. One of the things that we are dreaming about is that our, city and county folks could come together and have a one-stop shop that could actually work with people through questions about their building appliances, heating and cooling systems, how to incorporate solar and EVs and all of that. But we simply don't have that in our community. And it's got to be creative. But Paul, feel free to discuss that too.
Yeah, sure. So it's a great question. It's, there's been this unbelievable decline in the price of solar panels over the last 10 years, like a 90% price decline. And it's to the point where a lot of the cost of the system is in what they call soft costs. And some of that is code compliance, administration, and things like that. And that's among the solar policy people, that's been a target of a place to further reduce costs. unfortunately, Ryan had to run off to his family because he'd be the one who knows. I'm not really up to date on what the code requirements are and how they interact with your installation. But I would say that does go back to selecting not just the cheapest contractor, but a good one. Any good contractor in town should be able to answer all your questions about that and help you understand what the implications are, what might need to be done.
Except they don't necessarily agree with each other. So some say this has got to be done. You got to tear all this stuff out, double the cost of the project because you can't have your box above your porch anymore, even though it used to be allowed. It's not allowed anymore. Others say, oh no, that's still okay. And it makes a $10,000 difference in the cost of the project. And so it'd be nice to know, you know, and you know, who
Yeah,
it's the city
absolutely.
it's the city's code. It's not the contractor.
Well, yeah, if it's a specific code question, then I would, the city should be able to answer that. And, you know, it's what's changed. You used to be able to go in and kind of knock on their doors. And I know that's just more difficult with COVID in these last couple of years, but I would, perhaps some persistence would pay off. We don't have anybody from the city here tonight.
Yeah, you know how persistent I am. I have been persistent and they have not come out to look at it and let me know if that's going to be required or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, the installers in town are quite good. So to the extent that you're getting different answers from different installers, that's probably an indication that there's not clarity from the city side. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, that's unfortunately how development works. We're looking at a project right now, and it's that we're baking in 12 to 18 months for city permit review, and it's you know, it's a drag, and I wish it weren't. I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
There was a maybe a related question, and I think this person had to jump off, and I see she sent it to me directly, but the question was, she said a solar provider she spoke to warned about house roof insurance possibly being compromised as solar panels can cause leaks. She hasn't checked with other providers or insurance to see if that's true. Do you all know about, have you heard?
Mm-hmm. Can you say that again? There's questions about
roof insurance being compromised if you install solar.
Oh, you know, from what I've heard, actually, if you install
house
solar,
insurance.
yeah, it typically gets folded into your homeowner's insurance, from what I understand.
Right.
I'm not an insurance expert, and you should definitely check with your policy provider. But from what I've heard from both installers and solar owners, a lot of times it essentially becomes part of your house, and so gets wrapped into that policy.
I think what she was asking was about that they were telling her they wouldn't insure her roof anymore if she had solar panels on it because it might leak.
Yeah, I could see two parts of that. You know, unfortunately the correct answer is every insurance policy is different, and you need to talk to your provider. The longer answers are, I mean, I looked into it a little bit and found what Andrew said, that typically it just gets, if it's attached to your roof, it gets wrapped into your homeowner's insurance, and it's covered for the same acts of God as your house. So you'd have to think about wind and hail and things like that, but it really, every policy is different. The other place I could maybe see running into trouble would be in roof warranties. And if the installation was going to void the warranty on the roof. Don't have an answer for that. It's something you'd want to read the fine print on, maybe talk to the roofing installer and your solar installer and get their take on it. And, you know, in my other experience with roof warranties, they're often not as good as you want them to be. And by the time you've had a roof for 15 years, the amount they're going to cover for a replacement has come way down. And I don't want to jump ahead. I see another. Sorry, Abby, I'll hand it back over to you. I don't want to.
No, that's great. If I was gonna point out that the question about tax liability. Elizabeth's question.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a first stab at? When we installed solar, we didn't have a very high tax liability, and it's taken all 3 years for us to take take advantage of the entire credit. So it can work, but yeah. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Elizabeth, to your question, I think your understanding is basically correct. So it's a non-refundable credit. So all you can do is bring your liability down to zero. They're not going to cut you a check if you end up with a negative $1,000 tax bill. So I just took let's call it a $15,000 system. For the ease of math, I just took a third of that instead of 26%, called that $5,000. So you need to have $5,000. You need to be paying $5,000 in federal income tax to be able to capture all of that and bring it back down to zero. As Abby said, you can take that over several years. I looked into it. It's never clear to me if that was like for a fixed number of years or like for infinity, like capital gains or capital losses. But that's the basic idea. You have to have enough of a tax liability to be able to take advantage of that. Hence the problem for nonprofits like ourselves who have zero tax liability. So when we put in a solar system, we got none of that federal benefit.
Unless we can get that federal bill passed, and that's one of the great things that would open up, would make those credits fully refundable, and as well as fully refundable for nonprofits and other entities that currently can't capture the tax benefits. Let's see.
So, and Vicky's question about the
Yeah.
credit, that's not for heat pumps at this point. That's again.
Yeah, heat pumps are not included.
Although, did this go away too? I should know. At the state level, when we did our solar installation, there was also a tax credit for that's gone too. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that there's one for, or maybe it was heat pumps. There was one for geothermal that may have included language for heat pumps, but the geothermal one also got repealed anyway. So
yeah,
there's nothing. Yeah,
there's nothing right now. Yeah.
I'm trying to look too. I just had a conversation with somebody about, I had an email conversation with someone about how long the rollover period is for the federal ITC. And I feel like it's 20 years. There's a question about whether it was 5 or 20. And I'm pretty sure it was the longer, but I couldn't find it on my email. So I'd have to look back to confirm. So if anybody's watching this recording, don't quote me on that until that information is confirmed. And to the question about batteries, as far as the investment tax credit goes, if that's what you're getting at, so storage systems can be included in the 26% tax credit right now if you install it at the same time you install your solar. In other words, if you wrap everything together into one cost, you can apply the 26% to the total project cost. If you do batteries as a standalone project, there is no current incentive that you can use to apply to that project cost. The Build Back Better program does have a standalone storage federal tax credit, and that's one of the big things that I know the solar industry was really excited about, because a lot of people who have solar want to add storage, and there's no incentive, and the Build Back Better would create that. So it's one of the many incentives that we're pushing for in the BBB.
Yeah, and I'll jump. I'll talk about this stuff all day, so I apologize. But I will jump in and say a few things about batteries. And I'm always a supporter of any kind of renewable energy technology. Batteries, a couple things about them. One, if you want your rooftop solar system to act as a backup to the grid, that's actually not quite so simple. These systems are built so that if the grid goes down, your system shuts off as well. You need to have a non-grid tied system if you want to be able to provide your own power. The other thing about batteries is with our current net metering structure, the grid functions as a giant battery. Any overproduction, you get credited at the full rate, it goes onto the grid. So there's not really much of a financial benefit to having a battery system. In other markets, that's different because they have much more complicated electricity tariffs where there's a different rate depending on the time of day. There's a different rate depending on how much energy you use in the month. And you can start to play games with arbitrage. where you build it up when it's cheap and then run off your batteries when it's expensive and that kind of thing. But we have a flat rate, full retail rate net metering. So there's not a financial benefit to battery systems currently.
Thank you all. I realize it's 6:30. Thanks for sticking on a little bit longer. Appreciate everybody's good questions and taking the time, and apologies for my total failure to introduce you all. You should need no introduction at this point. You're local heroes, and thanks for the good work you do. We'll wrap up for this evening, but stay tuned and hope you can join us for the next time. Thanks everybody for